Join us now, Professor of History at Tulane University, Walter Isaacson. Walter is there for the New Orleans Book Festival at Tulane, one of the great events every year. He is the co-chair. Walter, we will get to that in just a moment. It's great to see you, but want to get you in on this conversation about President Biden, if this is, in fact, some kind of a soft launch of his 2024 campaign. He's, of course, widely expected to announce that he is going to run again, just a matter of time. And then on the other hand, looking at Iowa this weekend, where Ron DeSantis will be today, where Nikki Haley's been all week, where Donald Trump will be on Monday, sort of a soft launch for some of those candidates as well. How do you see this next year and a half playing out?
I think one of the interesting things we see happening is this notion of populism in both parties. I mean, one of the things about Biden's budget was an attack on the billionaires, on the corporations, trying to fight for the average worker, the average person. And I think populism in our American history has been a strand that has in some ways been in both parties. However, in the past 20, 30 years, the Democratic Party actually got away from being populist fighters for the average person and seemed to become a party of the elite, of Wall Street, big companies. And oddly enough, the Republicans, especially Donald Trump, now Ron DeSantis and others, have taken up the mantle of sort of a resentment populism. I think what Joe Biden's trying to do and has been trying to do for a while is say, I'm going to fight for the average guy. And it's not going to be a resentment populism. It's going to be almost a happy warrior populism of protecting Social Security, Medicare, and really trying to recapture the flag of the average guy populism for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, and Walter, hey, it's Catty here. That would certainly be a difference from Donald Trump, who seems to be running on a kind of, at the moment, largely a campaign of grievance about the FBI, 2020, the Department of Justice, a number of things. Can we talk about age? Not mine, not yours, but Joe Biden's. He would be historically the oldest president if he was re-elected. There are a slew of polls suggesting that Democratic voters, even those who like Joe Biden, have concerns with that. How much of a problem do you think it is in a historical context to have a president who would be that old?
Well, I do think that there's going to be a hunger in this country, and should be, for moving to a new generation, both from the Trumps and Biden and all. There's a great bench in the Democratic Party of wonderful people, I think, and a Republican Party of younger people. And I'm somewhat surprised, having grown up as part of a generation that came of age when John Kennedy made that change, that there hasn't been a torches passed moment in American politics. But Biden is particularly strong. He's done well. So it may be another 4 years before we get to that moment.
So, Walter, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that a man you know well, Elon Musk, is planning to build his own town just outside of Austin, Texas. Musk has reportedly purchased thousands of acres of land and has described the potential area as a utopia-like town. It's reported that Musk hopes his employees could live in the town with new homes that are at below-market rents. The town would be adjacent to the new Boring Company and SpaceX facilities. So, Walter, you are literally writing the book on Elon Musk. So just want to get your sort of, at this moment, your broad overview as to where things are right now and what is one of the more widely dissected and closely watched men in the world. This town, sure. But also, it was just a few minutes ago, we played clips from this hearing on the Capitol about the weaponization of government, and the Twitter files supplied by Elon Musk were part of that, too. What's he doing right now?
Well, he's a great story. I'm so, fortunate to be most interesting guy, most interesting person around every day. Something comes up. Getting first to your question about housing in the Austin area. Look, you look at San Francisco and the huge problems they have, and that's where the Bay Area is where a lot of Tesla and the Boring Company and Musk's companies were. He's moved center of gravity to Austin, Texas. And he and his brother and many other people said, hey, we need more housing. And that's absolutely true. It's something in this country that we need to be doing, is breaking down some of the barriers to creating housing, especially workforce housing. I think what he would like to do, too, is show how you can be greatly energy efficient. He now has solar rooftop tiles that are connected to storage batteries, get people off the grid. You got Starlink satellites. I think if he does a development where people can work, that would both alleviate his housing problem, but also show what a energy efficient community of the future could be.
Walter, I think we can get you an invite to the New Orleans Book Festival when your Elon Musk book comes out. But for now, tell us about what we can expect today and tomorrow. I understand Bill Gates is there. That should be a fascinating conversation. What else do you have going on in New Orleans?
Yeah, Bill Gates was particularly interesting last night because he talked about artificial intelligence, ChatGPT. You've discussed it on the show quite a bit, and how it's going to affect each industry. And he was telling the students that if you want to go into a field, figure out whether you're in architecture or medicine or even art or literature, how you're going to connect artificial intelligence to the field. Eric Holder was on last night, too, and was very serious about the importance of dealing with voting rights, that we're not understanding how bad some of these laws are and making it hard for students to vote, blacks to vote, and others. There's a wide range of people. Some of your fan club is there, John Meacham today, Eddie Cloud, Evan Thomas, Geraldine Brooks, Michael Lewis. I'm interviewing Brian Greene because I have a particular question I want to know, which is, how did the universe start? Why is there a universe? What happened? There's Imani Perry. Mitch Landrieu, who you know quite well, the former mayor of this city, is going to be interviewing Hannah Nicole Jones. But we also have brought in some military experts. I think General John Allen, General Stan McChrystal, and the Cato Institute, because we want, in this country, we don't get a good diversity of opinion sometimes. I think the Cato Institute has been helping us, too, to get a more libertarian view so that students at Tulane and the New Orleans community can, in a civil way, listen to all sides of discussions.
I love a panel discussion on the origins of the universe. Always thinking big, with another great lineup at the New Orleans Book Festival at Tulane University. It's running now
and
through
next
tomorrow.
Year, Willie Geist is going to be the headliner.
Uh-oh, I better write a book real quick, Walter. That's a lot of pressure. Walter Isaacson, great to see you. If you're in New Orleans, check out the festival. Thanks, Walter. We'll see you soon.